Another Wednesday, another episode of How to Adult with Travis Walker. I'm so excited about this episode. Today is the start of Hispanic Heritage Month, and so we are celebrating that by bringing on an amazing person. She was an orientation leader with me at Texas State University. She's currently an art teacher in San Marcos. Her name is Faith Flores. Before we get into the show, y'all make sure that you are following the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at How to Adult TW. And make sure that you're always sharing the content, always sharing the episodes. It helps me get into the ears of people I don't know. And that's the goal, y'all. That is the goal. So with all that being said, let's get into the show. All right, Faith, welcome to the How to Adult podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Did you ever think you were to help teach people how to adult?
I thought about it for a little bit. I think I've been teaching people how to adult ever since I was 19, when we were used to be orientation leaders. Because it was a lot. And I think ever since then, I've been teaching people not how to adult, but to kind of progress as a person. You know, even if they're children or something, I've always been not a role model because, you know, I'm not someone to look up to. However, someone to keep people accountable, if that makes sense. So,
yeah. I swear, teaching 18-year-olds going into college, I was like, what is wrong with you?
No, it's really funny because I still follow those same, orientees. And I'm like, wow, I remember you were not the same person that you are when I first met you. Like, I remember you didn't want to go to lunch without your mom. Or I remember I had this orientee that really did not want to register for classes without their mom. And you knew that was like a big rule. So I was like, and now I see her working at a restaurant in San Marcos. I'm like, good for you. See, you can do it. You got it. You're good. You're making your own money. You're good. But
that's so funny because
it's really
I have 8th graders that do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot.
That's so funny. And so just for reference, Faith has referenced this a few times. We were orientation leaders together at Texas State University. Mm-hmm. But just for reference for the audience, how old are you and what part of the world do you live in?
I am, let me get this right, because I definitely forgot last week, and my students had to help me. I'm 24. And I live in Kyle, Texas, but I teach in San Marcos, which is like 10 minutes away. But I'm planning on moving back because I really love San Marcos. And I really love being in the same environment as my students. So I'm planning on moving back, but I do not have anything bad to say about Kyle. It's just, honestly, it's the commute. Because it's not that far, but it's a lot. Especially that traffic.
Oh, for sure. Well, thanks for sharing that. And when it was the beginning of the year, which was like a week ago, and they were like, how old are you? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. Let's do the math.
I had an activity with my students, and they were you know how they have, like, you line up by your age, and they're like, Miss Flores, I know you're going to be at the end. I was like, all right, first of all, not nice. But they were like, but how old are you? And I was like, I'm 23? No, 5? No. 4. And I was like, wait, what's 1997, 2021 minus 1997? They're like, oh, 24. I'm like, okay. That's
there it is.
How old I am.
We stumbled upon it. Nice.
But it's okay.
So I brought you on because when this episode posts, it's going to be the first day of Hispanic Heritage Month. And so, do a little dance. And so I wanted to bring you on because I think it's really important. And also, I didn't really know that this was a whole month until like a month ago. And so if I didn't know it, other people don't know it. So we've got to call it out. But before we even get into this celebration, I just want to define what is Hispanic. What does that mean? Just so that we can all start off on the same definition.
That is a beautiful question because I get asked that so many times from even my students. And in my school, I love my school. But not, my school is predominantly, San Marcos is predominantly a Hispanic serving community. And Hispanic is a term that references people who are from or have originated from or have a heritage from Spanish-speaking countries or places. So Mexican speaks Spanish, like I'm like having a brain fart right now. Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, all these different places that have Spanish in their language is Hispanic. Now, Latino is something that's totally different, but yet can come under the same, category. But Latino is people who are from Latin countries that have been kind of colonized by Latin America or Spain. But like Brazilians are not Hispanic because their language is Portuguese. And so on for other places that have different languages. But Hispanic is referencing like Mexico, Panama, Brazil, not Brazil, I just said Brazil, Colombia, El Salvador, all of those places that have Spanish as their main language is Hispanic. Yeah. Which is, it's confusing, but it definitely makes it, because what a lot of people like don't understand is that there's more than just Mexican. And I'm Mexican, or I'm Hispanic. I'm not Mexican, actually, because I wasn't born in Mexico. I was born in the United States. So I'm Hispanic, being that my heritage comes from a Spanish-speaking country of Mexico. So it's a little terminology that kind of gets mixed up a lot. And a lot of people are like, what do you mean I'm not Mexican? I'm like, technically you're not. Like, yes, you can say you're Mexican, but technically you're not. You're Hispanic, right? And it's very funny because there's kind of like a disconnect with people who are Hispanic and people who grew up in those countries like Mexico, because they're like, well, I'm not Hispanic, I'm Mexican. And it's kind of like a little like, well, I'm not that, but you're not that. I'm like, well, we're kind of all the same. We're all encompassing of this country. So it's really important that, especially my students, because a lot of them don't think they're Hispanic. They think that they're just Mexican, or, you know, I'm like, well, we're all under the same bubble, right? But yeah, that's pretty much a loosened term about people who originated or have their heritage come from a Spanish-speaking country.
Wow. Okay. So you just, I want to unpack a few things here, because I think in the United States, we utilize the term Latino and Hispanic interchangeably. And what I'm hearing from you is that it's not. And so, so will you just clarify the difference again so that we can be very clear about this?
You very clear. Yes. So Latino is a person from a heritage that was a Latin colonized, like from Spain, a colonized type of country or region. So Latino. So, I mean, if we're being completely honest, Philippines, they can be registered as Latino because that is a Spanish territory as well. So it's basically anyone that has a Latin kind of connect to Spain or something, whether they've been colonized, whether they've been, I don't know, connected to that country or continent in some way. It's engulfing by that. So it's different. Like I said, Brazilians are Latino, but they're not Hispanic. And that goes for everything else. Not saying that we don't, you know, welcome them or, you know, try to banish them or anything, but it's just different because they're not Hispanic, and they're the first ones to say it too, because they speak Portuguese and they're very proud of that. It's a beautiful language. But it's not something that's turned by Hispanic.
Yeah. And you also mentioned a differentiation between being native born in a Hispanic country and being born in the United States. And so it seems a little complex. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of relationship between like native born people and then also people that are born outside of the country but identify in the culture?
Yes, exactly. So, for instance, I'm third generation. So not my parents and not my grandparents, but my great-grandparents came from Mexico. And in that time, you know, it was a very loose, not really a border, but more of a territory, you know? But like my boyfriend, Oscar, he is first generation. So his parents actually migrate from Mexico, and they have their own terminology of being Mexican, and Oscar is Hispanic. And it's very different. Like, of course, you can still call yourself Mexican, or you have, it's not something that you'll look down upon, but in the correct terminology, you would be a Hispanic person. Yeah. And there's some type of like, like people from Native to people that are Hispanic, there's a different in cultures, because there is a very different culture being a Hispanic in America and being a Mexican and a Native in Mexico, because there's two different worlds there. Not so much like, yes, socially, economically, demographically, but in just the way our culture is now. Like the way I prepare my food here in America, being a Hispanic, is completely different than in Mexico. Like, yeah, we could have the same type of like beef, chicken, and stuff like that, but as far as how we prepare it, where we get our stuff from, how we, create like flour tortillas. I don't know if you know this, but flour tortillas are not a thing in Mexico at all. So if I were to make that for some of my family members in Mexico, they'd look at me like, what are you doing? It's very different because the Texas culture and, using different ingredients from different places, because America is somewhat of a melting pot. We have these different influences. And in Mexico, they're very proud in the traditions that they have, and they keep it for a long time, and they still have. So it's really just a different in cultures. Even though we have the same background and heritage, we have different environments that affect it a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. And so you've mentioned things like language, you've mentioned things like food, but are there other key characteristics or indicators of Hispanic culture that we should celebrate or we should acknowledge right here?
Definitely. I think that being a Hispanic, especially in Southern America, is very important to show your heritage and show where you're from, because there's such a big stereotype, right, of how Hispanic people or Mexican people should act, or how they should work, or where they should work, or what they should do. So being an American Hispanic, it really gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of ways to express yourself. I mean, like for me, I personally do not like I guess it's understandable, but when I was growing up, I was a Hispanic in San Antonio. Like, I went to school on the West Side. I lived my life, and I loved my life. I would not change it for a lot. However, some people look down on like girls who looked like me or acted like me, and I still teach those same girls, and they characterize them as like hot Cheeto girls, or like they're bad. But it's a culture. It's how you were raised. It's what you're surrounded by. And I think how we express ourselves in America and being Hispanic is so important, because we have this right to be who we are. And just because we play loud music sometimes, and just because, we have different ways of saying things, and I can have my little Latina twang or something like that, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be fetishized or stereotyped as a type of person. And I think that's something that I try to teach my kids, especially my girls, because I know what it feels like to kind of be characterized at such a young age that, well, you're acting like that, so of course you don't care about yourself. I'm like, I care about myself a lot. Okay. This is who I am. So I think when it comes to characterizing Mexican and Hispanics, Mexican, when you're in Mexico, you have a certain lifestyle that everyone has lived for hundreds and thousands of years. However, sure, whenever you're Hispanic in America, you kind of have that freedom to be yourself. You have that freedom to present yourself in your own way. And yes, you're still going to be looked upon as like a Cheeto girl, or, people call it the Edgar haircut or something for boys, but it's really just putting them in a box and not letting them kind of express themselves or treat themselves how they want to be. And that's also kind of really secluding them to who they want to be, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, well, you act like that because you're Mexican, but it's like, no, I act like this because this is who I am. This is my environment. This is how I express myself. So I think with the difference between Mexican and Hispanic is that we have a lot more opportunities to show our true selves and to surround ourselves by people that we really want to surround ourselves by, rather than like, oh, well, this is where you are in Mexico and this is what you're going to do. and there's not much more of that. But here, going to school, I remember when I went to high school, and like later middle school, I don't want to be condescending, but I haven't seen any other people other than Mexican in that setting. So I was like, whoa, like there's all these type of people here, it was very nice and very accepting of me, especially with who I was. And it was really, really nice to be able to experience that being in the environment that I was in.
Yeah. And so as we're thinking about like characteristics, I can hear in what you're saying that it's more complex than that. That there's so many different many different ways that people express who they are, and it's not so easy to pinpoint it. Is that right?
Yes, it's not easy to kind of put someone in a box and to kind of label someone as just like, oh, well, they just have a big Hispanic or Mexican family. Like, they're just going to end up just like everybody else. But in the way we are today, and I keep trying to tell my kids, is that you can be whatever you want to be. You don't have to be in the same, environment that you're in. If it's not good for you, you can change it. You have the ability to change it. And it's a lot harder to have that type of opportunity in Mexico, because let's say that your family owns, like, I have family that has restaurants. I have family that owns, different types of farms. Usually when you're in that setting, that is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, But here you have that opportunity to see the different things that you can do. You can go to college. You can go to a tech school. You can maybe have some type of talent that you progress. I mean, look at me. Like, I wouldn't be able to do what I do if my parents and my family and my surroundings haven't expressed their want and need for me to express myself through art. Because I knew that if I was in a different setting, I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to, show myself expressively. And that turned into a whole career that I love doing and I love showing to my kids. So I think it's very different, and it's very, it's very accommodating to different lifestyles.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring you on specifically for this topic because I think that you do a very interesting job in balancing both your American culture and also your Hispanic culture. How is that throughout your life? How has that been, how have you been able to balance that? Was that something that came easy to you? Was that something that you had to kind of discover that I've got to balance? Yes, I'm an American, but I'm also a Hispanic woman, and so how do you balance that? What was that journey like?
I think it's balancing, because I can speak Spanish, but not the best that I should be able to, and that's something that I have been working on for a long time. My parents both speak Spanish, and when they were raised, and they were born in Austin, Texas, which is up the road, and they were both born there, and they knew each other ever since they were little. When they were raised, like, my grandparents spoke nothing but Spanish, and that was their first language. When they went into school, there was absolutely no bilingual program at all. This was back in the 60s and 70s. Wow. And actually, one of my parents actually failed kindergarten because she couldn't speak English, and they thought of that as a detriment for her, or for them. It was my mother. And it was very disheartening because once my grandparents saw that, they're like, okay, well, you're going to speak English from now on. We're not going to do that anymore because your education is important to us, So my parents have been speaking English ever since they were very little, not because, they were ashamed of it, because they're very proud of their culture and their language, but because my grandparents didn't want them to fail. And so they had to speak English ever since they were little. And that kind of mentality of, oh my gosh, like, me speaking my native language is going to ruin my chances of a career or for progression in my life, they instilled that to us when we were younger. Because my mom was like, well, this happened to me and your dad had to deal with that, so you're only going to speak English. We're not going to teach you Spanish because we don't want you to go through the same thing we did. And now me and my brothers, I speak Spanish because I've been learning, and, my family, a lot of them speak Spanish, but some of my brothers have never had to experience to do that. But now it's detrimental to them because now everybody is accepting of speaking Spanish. Well, not everybody, but most, careers and jobs. But
Right.
they're like, well, isn't your parents, don't they speak Spanish? Like, yes, they do. But it's different because they're the ones they had this notion in their head, not because they were bad people, but because they experienced it. They lived through it. And now I remember growing up not knowing that much Spanish, and people would be like, oh, well, you're a coconut, like white on the inside or brown on the outside.
Wow.
You don't know your culture, you don't know this. And kind of like the Selena movie, where they're like, we're too Mexican for the Americans and we're too American for the Mexicans. It's pretty much the same thing that I had to experience. But it's not my fault, and it's not my parents' fault either. It's just the way that we were kind of conditioned because we didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. They still had that mentality. So it was really hard. Not hard, I would say. Let me use another word. It was very challenging to kind of, because I do show off as a Hispanic person, but to people who have a big filter and thinking of what Hispanic should look like, I don't fit that filter. So when it would be time to be like, oh yeah, I'm Hispanic. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents were all Hispanic, and I have some Mexican ancestors, and they're like, well, you don't look like it, and you speak really good English, so I don't think no. I've actually had people like deny my heritage because they're like, no, I don't see it and I don't hear it, so that's not what you are. I'm like, yes, it is. It is exactly who I am. But I think it's just living with that. Well, you're not enough here. Like, you can cook this, but you like to eat corn dogs, so that's not a Mexican thing. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it was just very confusing at a young age. It's like, well, I do like to eat, American food, but I can cook Mexican food, but I can cook American food. But, it was very like, aren't I? Yes, no, maybe so. Like, it was just very confusing. And I just remember thinking that and then finally when I was, I think like in high school or going into college, I was like, you know what? I'm myself. I came from San Antonio, and that's my experience. I'm not gonna justify who I am or how I live my life or what I know or what I don't know, because I'm very proud of my heritage, and I'm very proud of being from San Antonio, and I don't think I'm gonna let up on either of those prides for anything. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's that's really interesting because I was having this discussion in one of my classes this week. I teach African American ethnic studies, and they just echo everything that you said in my class, right? Because a lot of my mixed students say, well, I'm not black enough to be black, and I'm not white enough to be white, and so I have this identity crisis, and that's such a hard place to be, and which is just another thing that you were saying, and that's really important. And so this is a part we're talking about Hispanic culture today, but I think this is something that a lot of people go through in a bunch of different cultures, and we also talked about how others can perceive you a certain way, and then they tell you what your heritage is and is not. And we just had a long discussion about why do other people feel the power to say what you are.
Exactly.
And so you've experienced this, and so why do people feel that way? Why do people think that they have the power to tell you what you are and are not?
I think it's just confusion. I think they're just how do you say, incompetent in their own beliefs, or they feel threatened. That's another thing too, because there's been so many times where people, like when I was in high school, I was kind of looked down upon a lot because I didn't really go to any type of stereotype or like I called myself a emo chola because I would wear a lot of black, but I would do my hair and my makeup all big and everything. And I remember like people that I didn't associate with myself with because I didn't really enjoy their company. That's the nicest way I can say I didn't like them. But they would always be like, you don't even know who you are. Like, look at you. You don't, like, why would I even want to talk to you or stuff like that? Or they would make fun of me saying that I don't know who I am because they didn't know who I was, or they didn't even try, or they would be like, you look like a white girl with like Latino makeup. And I'm like, okay, with my last name being Flores and everything. Okay. You know, and it was just very different for me. And I remember, you know, even being in relationships, I just had this experience where when I was in a relationship with someone, their family like did not like me, and I could sense it. And you know, it was very disturbing because I wanted to be around them. You know, I'm a very family oriented person. My family's my everything. My family are visiting me right now. They're in my house because I'm very close to that. So I always had the mentality, if I'm in a relationship with someone, I'm going to do the same thing with them because family is everything to me. And I just never had that connection. And it was very hard because they didn't try to get to know me. They just had this like, oh, well, that's what's her face. Like I remember one time, one of them were like, oh, okay, well, we're going to do what Faith wants. So we're going to go to a Mexican restaurant and we're going to go watch Book of Life. Because that's what Faith wants. And I was like, wait a minute. And I was like, you know, real young. So, of course, I didn't speak out. I was, you know, always taught to be respectful. So I was like, I didn't want to go to a Mexican restaurant. I just had tacos at home. You know, I want to go do what I want. You know, I want to experience different things. But they're like, yeah, that's what Faith would want. We're going to do that for her. I'm like, thank you. Like, it was very confusing to me because I'm like, did you think that's what I wanted? Or did you ever hear, like, of course I love the Book of Life, but I never told you that. You know, I never expressed that to you. So I think you just kind of put me in that little shell that, oh, well, this is what this is aimed for, so she will love it, you know. So it was very difficult, especially when I started getting older and trying to learn who I was. That people were like, well, you don't know who you are, so I'm going to tell you. You're this or you're that. And I'm like, well, no, that's not who I am. But yeah, it was difficult, especially with people who didn't even try to understand where I was coming from.
Right. A lot of that is like a backhanded compliment. Like they're trying to please you, but it's like actually insulting.
Yeah, it's very insulting. I remember getting like, oh, you have good hair. Like, it's not that thick. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's kind of thick. And they're like, well, you manage it really well. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Okay.
That's like, another thing that my ethnic studies class was talking about this week. We spent like 30 minutes talking about hair and how people feel the need, like, I'm going to touch your hair and how...
Or I'm going to comment on your hair. I'm like, unless I'm paying you to touch my hair at a salon, then don't... I've had, like, I understand in some, like, instances, like Hispanics or Mexicans or any Latino culture, we have something called ojo. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but
no, I haven't.
Let's say that, and it's very true. I'm very superstitious too. I believe in a lot of things that I've been raised with because I have experienced it. So let's say that someone across the room is really admiring like my shirt or something, and if you admire it, you have to go touch it, because if you don't, you have the curse of ojo on it, which means that you curse that garment or you curse something. And let's say someone gave me ojo and didn't touch it, my shirt's going to rip or I'm going to lose it or, you know, something's going to happen to it. Wow. And that's very prominent, especially with hair. I've actually had a situation like in my family where my tia, my aunt, she had that experience when she was younger. My grandmother swears up and down, and I do believe her, that someone gave her hair ojo when she was little. And it was beautiful and curly and gorgeous. And then after a week, like, it fell out. And she had sores and everything. And my grandmother's like, she gave her ojo. Someone gave her ojo. And now we're scared. Like, every time we like something, even babies, especially babies, like a little tap on the foot or something. Just to show that, you know, we're going to get rid of that curse. But other than ojo, and other than if I pay you to touch my hair, don't touch it, please. I've had that a lot.
Yeah, but that makes a lot of sense. And so I see your art in the background, and I see the things that you post on Instagram. And so I just want to talk about for a moment, how do you celebrate your Hispanic culture throughout the year and also just in your daily life? So how do you celebrate that culture?
I celebrate a lot with my kids. We talk about a lot of stuff at school. I really appreciate our school because they put in a time in the morning for 30 minutes that we meet with the same amount of kids or the same kids every day. So
Wow.
they call it morning meeting. But we get to refresh. We get to talk about the things that, obviously I'm not going to go into their daily lives and everything. But sometimes I'm like, what did y'all have for breakfast this morning? They're like, I had flautas from last night. I'm like, me too. Because most of them, we lived similar lives. Or I lived a life similar to them, being a Hispanic in an American middle school. I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I kind of just be like, oh, well, the Dos Matos coming up who has their ofrendas out. And they're like, man, my mom made me stay up till blah, blah, blah to, cut this out. So I always try to, because I know the different things that go on through a year. I know that there's different preparations that all family does. Like waking up early Sunday morning or Saturday morning at 5 o'clock. And your mom has, Marco Anthony Solis, like they're playing. And then you're like, oh, it's time to clean up. I've said that to my kids. I'm like, y'all ready for cleaning day on Saturday? And they're like, oh, yes.
Oh,
like,
no.
Everyone has the same experience. Because
yeah.
they're like, yes, my mom plays, like, Michael Salgado and she makes me get up and do the dishes. I'm like, hey, I have to do it too. You got to do it too. It's a process. We all go through the same thing. So I try to do that as much as I can. And I like to incorporate different Hispanic artists in my lessons, especially ones that are still alive. I think it's very important to show students artists that are still alive, because I think there's a big disconnect with that, because they think, oh, well, they're dead. I don't know what they're going through. But if you bring out artists that are still alive, we still have the same experience because we're still living in the same time zone, in the same environment. So they'll have more connection to those artists, especially if they're Hispanic or Latinx. So that's what I try to do.
That's awesome, and I think a lot of teachers do this. I got to teach high school history this summer, and it was really cool teaching the Chicano mural movement, and the kids really enjoyed it. And we went through all of the things. I actually went to the murals in San Diego like a year or two ago, and it was amazing. It was
those
incredible.
Are beautiful. Yes.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of wish I love my kids and I love my school, but I kind of wish I also worked in the San Antonio district, because there's so many murals in San Antonio, and there's murals in San Marcos too.
Right.
But I just love showcasing murals. I love that so much because it's free. It's for the community. It's not for a museum. It's not for someone who has thousands of dollars to buy it. It's for the community. It's free. And I think that's the best and the most genuine type of art there is. Anything that's for the people. But yeah.
And there's a ton of history behind this, because talking about our ancestors, so many people have fought and fought to make sure that those areas are protected and free for people to go see. And so there's honoring of culture, and there's also honoring the fight that people have had to go through to protect those areas. So that's really important, I think. And so I want to move into just how people should celebrate this time. There's over 60 million Hispanic people in the United States. Yes. It's the second largest racial group in the United States. Yep. So why is celebrating this culture and just other cultures important? Obviously, I'm doing an episode on this. This is not my culture, but I think it's important to celebrate other people's culture. And so I want to just talk about, why is it so important to celebrate culture and other people's culture as well?
Yes. It's funny because I have a co-teacher and we're like partners in crime. She teaches the other art class, art 2 and 3. I teach art 1 for all grades. Yeah. And we're talking about this, and a lot of people have a big outreach and want to celebrate Cinco de Mayo. Which I am not discrediting Cinco de Mayo for what it is. It is a good monument and a good, it should be celebrated. However, this is our month. This is our time. This is an all-in, because Cinco de Mayo is only for Mexicans.
Right.
It's not for all Hispanics. And Hispanic Heritage Month, I think it kind of gets pushed under the rug, because this usually... this is when school starts. Everyone's going with their head cut off. So when it comes around Hispanic Heritage Month, like this happened to me last year. I wanted to do stuff for it. But by the time I had my ducks in a row for the school year, it already passed, So I think it's very important, especially in schools, that we celebrate it in the right way and not, oh, let's all go to a Mexican restaurant and drink margaritas. No, that's not how to, first of all, that's a Mexican restaurant. That's not Hispanic, right? That is Hispanic, but that's not all Hispanic. I think to celebrate this in your own way is to educate yourself in any way that you can, or you're able to, on different Hispanic cultures, because we're different. We're so different. But the thing that really encompasses us all is our language and our love for our culture. You know, like if I went to a Colombian household, they would have things super different. Probably the only thing that we would all have is a virgen in the back or a cross. You know, our religion obviously is something that is, you know, something that we all practice in. But as far as the food, as far as the dynamics, as far as the music, I think it's hilarious. Travis, I think it's hilarious whenever I go in a Mexican restaurant and I hear Colombian salsa playing. Or like, and I'm like, why is this playing? Like, this is not our music. Like, I understand if you're playing a radio, okay, but if you're like trying to make it a Mexican restaurant ambience, like that is not our music. And I'm not saying it's bad, it's beautiful, but it's not ours. Like, just because it sounds a certain way doesn't mean that it's the same culture. So I think people educating themselves in any way. And another thing is to not pretend that you know things that you don't. Because I think that's the biggest things as Hispanics. They're like, oh, well, y'all grew up like this, or you know this, or obviously if you're Hispanic, you have to do that. But things that, you know, Puerto Ricans go through every day, it's not the same thing that I go through. You know, they have a lot of different inner layers of their culture than I do that I don't experience, you know? So I think it's very important to maybe go to museums that have different Hispanic cultures and art, watch different movies, because there are different movies. Not everything is like Nacho Libre. Everything is different. You know, watch a Brazilian movie, or watch for Latinos, or watch like, you know, Dominican actors, Puerto Rican actors, all that different stuff. You have to really, really try to educate yourself and not try to explain things that you don't know. Because I think that's something that's very frustrating as a Hispanic person. And I've had conversations with my family and stuff like that, where people pretend to know what they don't know. And it actually frustrates us so much because it makes us feel like we don't know ourselves. Right. So when it comes to Hispanic Heritage Month, I think it's super important for people to kind of step out of their bubble and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, it's okay not to know things. It's okay not to understand something. It's okay to, you know, when I have an altar in my house because my mom had an altar. But when it came, you know, when people come over, they're like, why do you have that? Like, that's different. I'm like, oh, well, it's because our ancestors are here looking over us. And they're like, oh, okay. Don't make up a story about, you know, different things that you don't know about. Ask me or look it up or try to, you know, be in the conversation. Don't try to presume that you know everything, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't know everything. I don't know a lot about other cultures, but I don't go over there's like, oh, yeah, they do this because of this, or, you know, they're like this, or Latinos are always mad because they have to do this. Ugh. You know, it's just try to get out of your own box to keep you from putting us in a box. You know, trying to educate yourself. Like, you know how I said before about people, they just are incompetent in their own insecurities.
Sure.
That's why they try to kind of make us feel bad.
Yeah.
This is your time to understand that and to keep yourself accountable. Be like, you know what? I probably think this, or I think this about this person or this culture because I don't know about it. This is Hispanic Heritage Month. Let me learn about it. You know, let me outreach myself and let your kids learn about it. You know, because if y'all learn together, y'all are able to fight and kind of unlearn those stereotypes that you already have. So I think it's a very big opportunity, especially being Hispanic Heritage Month. There are going to be a lot of opportunities to do that. So
absolutely
take on those opportunities. Be okay with being uncomfortable. I think the biggest thing is that people don't want to be embarrassed for not knowing something, but it's not embarrassment. It's just you have to learn, you know?
Absolutely.
Or even just open your eyes, because we're everywhere. We're everywhere.
For sure. 60 million people. Yeah.
We are we're very happy people. Okay. So we love our people, and, we're everywhere. So open your eyes. Don't be afraid to have a conversation with someone. Don't be afraid to go to a restaurant that you've never been at and enjoy the culture. Like, I don't understand that people are scared of things that they don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's very much different cultures as well. And that's why they try to put us in a box of, the crazy Latina or the lazy whoever. I'm like, you don't know me. You don't know who I am.
Right.
Like, and you're trying to tell me that. So I feel like this is a great opportunity for people to educate themselves. Stop pretending like you know me, because you don't.
And so, if this is not your culture, I encourage you to take this opportunity. Like Faith says, this is an opportunity to learn. And so take that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned Cinco de Mayo. You mentioned a few other things. And so I want to get into this because I think it's important. Mm-hmm. And so I want to talk about the difference between culture appropriation and culture appreciation. Because there's a difference, and I want to try to draw a line. I don't think you and I are going to solve the world's problems right now, but I want to try to draw a line between appropriation and appreciation. Right.
Yes.
If you could. Let's see what you have to say on this.
I could have a whole college course about this, Travis. Like, you have no idea. So, listen, when it comes to Cinco de Mayo, especially because, everyone wants to celebrate that for some reason. Like, I understand Mexicans but I feel like people that don't even know the history behind it, try to do that. But when it comes to Cinco de Mayo, or when it comes to Halloween, it's a big thing. And it is very frustrating to me when it comes to Dia de los Muertos, because I'm very, very passionate about putting up ofrendas, and, because I've had some deaths in the past couple of years of people that I care about very much ever since I would think I was a sophomore in high school. I think, not high school, in college. And even when we were orientation leaders, that's when people very close to me start passing away, and, it kind of becomes a trend. So I have an ofrenda that I put up. But there's nothing that really bothers me more than people putting on like calavera makeup and having like lingerie or, something very, because it's not for that. It's not for that. And I understand if you think the calavera is beautiful, it is beautiful. But just be respectful as you show it. It's like, to me, it's like having a picture of a loved one in your hand while you're doing something really disrespectful, in your thing. And I understand, be yourself. I'm not, trying to tell people what they should and shouldn't wear. But you have to understand that certain things have such a big cultural impact to other people. Like the calaveras, big thing. I have them all over my house because I think of them as my loved ones looking over me. But when I see that on people that don't know the meaning to it and playing around with it like it's a toy, it's not a toy. It's something that's very important to us. So when it comes to appreciation, I think it's just respecting the things that are important to you or other people. Like, you have to know. You cannot just say, well, I think it's cute. I'm like, what you think is cute is something that's very spiritual for me. So it's not really a toy. It's not a toy. It's a way of life, and it's a culture. And I think when it comes to Hispanics especially, and Latinos, when it comes to like the fake beards and the sombreros and I get mad when I think about it. And like the ponchos and everything. It's like we're a costume. It's like we're just like slapstick comedy to them. And it's very disheartening because I understand, you want to have fun, but to have fun at other people's expense is not fun. That's just being malicious.
Right.
Because you use it's Halloween because I know I can. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
If you wouldn't do it on every other day, what makes you think you can do it on Halloween?
Yeah.
Just because you need Halloween to show that you think that a certain, social group is funny to you doesn't mean Halloween's the right time to show it. You can tell me that any other day, and you can show your true colors in that way, And that's how I personally feel about it, because, the same people that, well, not the same people, but sometimes it's the same people that like to make fun of cultures are the same ones that go to our restaurants, and the same ones that have some type of fetish or liking to Latinas, or, you know what I mean? They think of us as objects. And when you think of something as an object, it's real easy to put yourself in their shoes and to play around like it's dress up, because you don't think of us as human beings. So I know not everyone has that hard and disheartening, malicious attempt to do that, but that's what it references to me. I would really think about what message you're trying to portray. If you feel like it's necessary for you to do something, or you want to use Halloween or a different dress-up day as an excuse to pretend to be someone, because maybe you're not comfortable learning who that person is or what that culture is, so you're just going to pretend like you do and dress up as it, which is something that is very disheartening to me. But I know I've had conversations with my family and different other friends that I have that kind of go through the same thing, and we're like, I just wish that they would just take a step back and understand, what message am I showing? What am I doing? And would I do this any other day?
Right.
Am I using Halloween as an excuse? Because I understand Halloween, yes, let your, express yourself. If you want to be a, goblin or something cool, like that's your... But if you're making a joke at someone else's expense, then it's not really expressing yourself, but using that as an opportunity to bring someone down. It's kind of, I don't want to put that I don't want to connect the two. It's kind of like The Purge, If you wouldn't do it another day, but you did it now because it's legal, then you always had that in your mind. You know what I mean? Like, It's still something that's in your mind, but you have this excuse now, like, oh, well, I can do this because it's this, but that doesn't mean that the day before you didn't think of us as a costume, that you didn't think of us as a toy. Yeah. Because, it's not like that morning you're like, you know what, I think that, no, you've had that in your mind, and now you finally have the opportunity to show it. So I think it's very important for people to really I don't want to take the fun out of Halloween, because I love Halloween. Right. But I don't want to take the fun out of it, but I just want us to keep ourselves accountable. Like I was talking about before, about us keeping our kids accountable. When we keep our kids accountable, I think adults kind of think that when you turn 18 or 21, that you don't have to keep yourself accountable anymore.
Oh, you do.
And you definitely do. Just because, when you're in school, a teacher can tell you that that's not the right choice to make, doesn't mean that when you get older, you have the excuse, well, I don't have a teacher, so I don't have to make the right choice. Yes, you do. You definitely do. You definitely do.
And that defines you as a person, I think. Yes. If you're going to make the wrong choice knowingly, that defines you as a person, in my opinion.
Just to get a rise out of someone, you know? Yeah. Because they're not doing it for themselves. They're not doing it for themselves. They're doing that to get a rise out of someone. Yeah. And I think for that intention, I don't think it's the right way. If you truly believe that, this would be something that would help, like the Calavera, if you feel connected to that in some way, of course, that's your right. But if you're going to make fun of it or, present it in a way that it's not presentable, then that's when you're kind of crossing the line and kind of making it like a toy. And it's not a toy. It's something very important. Yeah. I've always had a conversation with that internally, especially in college and during Halloween. It's hard to get away from it. Oh, but, yeah. But I kind of have to count backwards from 10. And, and yeah, especially being an RA and seeing my residents walk out of the building. And I'm like,
oh, yeah.
This is another... think about your choices.
This is just another conversation that I've had with my ethnic studies students, and they're so brilliant. And so we try to draw the line between appropriation and appreciation. And one of my students said, well, when you're doing something that's another culture for personal gain. For her, that was the line. And so you mentioned doing the mass for Dia de los Muertos. You're doing that for clout. You're doing that for so other people to notice you. That is appropriation. If you're not doing it to honor the culture, if you're not doing it to honor the meaning of it, that is the line that we drew in my class. So
I think really cool. I definitely agree with that, because you know, there are some people that connect with some type of spirituality, or like they're Catholic the same, but they're not Hispanic, but they do want to show appreciation for the things that we go through. That's definitely, and it means a lot because it shows that we're seen. But when it's appropriated, whenever I see like the telenovela, or, you know, when people dress up as like this Latina something, or, you know, and it's just like, you're using my lifestyle as a costume, as a toy, you know, to play with. That's what your students said, as their self-gain, as clout or something. That's where you just want attention, whether it's, you know, your own attention, or whether it's attention on your physique or something. It's not to show honor or kind of appreciation for that culture. It's really like, well, I think that Latinos are really sexy, so I'm going to dress up as one because I want to be sexy. No, that's not what that's about. That's not what it's for. I'm not a costume for you to wear, you know? So I definitely understand. Our kids are so smart. Can we just talk about how smart students are? Like, they're so smart. And they really think that they're dumb. I hate it whenever they say that. I really do. When they say, well, I'm not smart, but they like come up with some type of term and they talk about things, and I'm like, you're so smart. And you're only like 12. Like, I wish I had the confidence that you had when I was your age, but you know, I didn't. And they have so much confidence. Oh, they do. They do.
So let's get into the closing questions of the show. The show has just flown by.
I know. I'm looking at my thing. It's already been like 40 minutes.
I know.
I wish my classes went by this fast.
So thinking about what we've talked about, you know, Hispanic Heritage Month, we're getting into it right now. What is your final piece of advice to people out there that want to either celebrate or appreciate the culture? What's that final piece of advice that you really want to stick?
Yeah, I think definitely for me is take a step back. If you don't know something, then take a step back, because it shows a lot of character and it shows a lot of maturity for people, especially in adults, to take a step back and try to understand the perspective of someone that you don't know, of an experience that you don't know. And like I said, we are branded as certain stereotypes at such a young age.
Right.
And it's so sad, because I was branded at like the age of 11 or 12 as like I said, hot Cheeto girl. And I see my girls go through that at school, and it's so detrimental to our self-esteem that when it comes time for us to actually appreciate our culture, we're kind of scared to do it because people already think they know who we are. So in order for that to obviously that's not going to stop altogether, but for us to really move on and to appreciate things we don't know, you have to take a step back, because it's always the people that refuse to take that step back that put people in those boxes, that put down 11-year-old girls or 11-year-old boys, because we know who we are, but because they didn't take that step back and because they don't want to understand, they're going to shut them down because they feel that they are superior to them. And that starts at a young age. So if you take a step back now, and if you take a step back and try to understand or try to even educate yourself on something different, like a Hispanic culture, not only Mexican, but all the other Spanish-speaking countries and regions, I think it's super important, because a lot of people don't know their impact, especially at kids, because that's something that really is important to me for these kids. Their confidence, because once it starts as a kid, like I said, I grew up very embarrassed of my culture. I grew up very not not confident at all because I didn't know who I was. And that led to people not knowing who I was either. And that led to a lot of confusion. And it's a lot harder for someone to appreciate something that they don't want to know. Right. So it's important to kind of really understand, do I know this? Do I really know this? Rather than watching the Machete movies or, going to Taco Cabana. Do I really know this? Or do I pretend like I do? Because if I pretend like I do, then I need to know this stuff. Because there's no getting rid of us. Because we're here.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're here. So whether you want us to, be who we are and not be so confused about it, you have to know about us. We're here. And it's not that we don't want to be here. We want to be here. But it's a sense of getting to know us as people, and not by our regions. I know a lot of people stereotype or judge people on who they are because of the countries that they're from. And they look at the state of the country right now. And, Hispanics are all bad because Mexico's this. I was like, I was born here. Like, what are you talking about? I'm this way because of here, Right. So it's you have to really think about the terms you use too. Like, these little excuses and reasoning for judging someone, you have to think about those too. Because if your opinion is based off of something that you know absolutely nothing about, then it's not really an opinion. It's malice. It's just something that's stereotypical that you've just been engulfed in your brain. And those are the same people that don't have an issue with making fun of us. Yeah. On October 31st.
That totally makes sense. And moving on to our next closing question, we're young adults. We're trying to figure this out.
For the most part.
We're trying to learn how to adult. And so what's something that you're trying to figure out as a young adult right now?
But yeah. Yeah, what was the question again? I honestly started thinking about adulting and my mind blanked out because I forgot. I don't know if I paid a bill on time right now, to be honest.
That is completely fine. What's something that you're trying to figure out as a young adult?
As a young adult, I think it's definitely slowing down because ever since I was little, I've always wanted to have everything planned out. And I'm like, okay, by the time I'm 18, I'm going to do this. By the time I'm 20, I'm going to do this. And by the time I'm, And now that I have the career that I went to school for, I'm like, I have more goals that I have. And I'm like, you know what? I need some time for me to relax because I come home exhausted every single day.
Yeah.
I'm like, it shouldn't feel like this. It shouldn't feel like I'm draining myself every single day. So I'm really trying to teach myself how to calm down and to know that, you know what, if this week, if I don't do something that's due, I don't know how many weeks ahead, I'll be okay, or I don't need to drain myself so much because it really takes a toll out of me. I didn't think I would start having gray hairs by 25, or 24, but I already do, And I'm like, I have a lot of, and I think about like my parents, what were they doing at this age and everything like that. And it's very crazy to me because I really need to relax because if I don't, I'm going to age a lot faster than I should. Right. So I think it's really taking a step back and enjoying the opportunities that I have now rather than when I get older, because I do plan on having a family. I do plan on, having a lot of kids and everything. And I'm like, well, I'm living now with my dogs. I'm like, I won't have this same opportunity, the same feeling ever in my life. Yeah. Because later on, I'm going to be in a completely different setting. So I need to learn how to calm down, slow down, and enjoy the things I do have now. Because later on, I'm not going to have it. Not because I'm missing out, but because I move on as a person. Yeah. I progress as a person. So I think slowing down and appreciating the setting that I'm at and the support that I have and, the school that I'm at, I'm never going to see those kids if I move away. And if I do other stuff, they're going to be older. I'm not going to have them at 11 forever. So I think this is the time for me to really put my mark and to really enjoy the time that I'm at.
That totally makes sense. There's so much pressure in this time period, and so slowing down and reflecting, I think, is a good thing. A good thing to work on. So if people want to learn, take a lot of pictures. If people want to learn more about you or connect with you, where should we go? What's the Instagram at? Shameless plug.
The Instagram, shameless plug. Let me see. Honestly, okay. I think let me see. It's Faith Flores Art. Let me make sure that it's right. That is my art page when I was in college. Have I been on it in a long time? No. Should I put more stuff on it? Absolutely. Yeah. So it's Faith Flores Art. FaithFlores Art. I have some of my work from college on there. I do need to update a lot. I do commissions. So shameless plug on that. Yeah. I do commissions and I do a lot. So, and if you need any questions about, or if you have anything y'all want to comment about or have a conversation about, I'm always open to have a conversation. So that is my shameless plug if you ever want to reach out to me.
I love it. That's an amazing shameless plug, and thanks for doing it. And so make sure that you go follow Faith Flores Art. Make sure that you also follow this podcast on Facebook and Instagram, How to Adult TW.
Yes.
And make sure you share all the content. Make sure you love this content and rate and review it and all the things so that we can continue to make this content. Faith, thank you so much for coming on and educating us. Thank you so much.
Yes, it's been forever. It was so good to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But congratulations on everything that you've done. I see your pictures. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been forever since we've been scarfing our face down at Harris for 20 minutes. Yeah, so congratulations on everything, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I never really have a voice when it comes to stuff. I usually just talk to my dog, so this is great.
Right, that's huge, and so thank you for the opportunity. I learned a lot. I'm sure that the listeners learned a lot, and so I really appreciate it and giving this opportunity to celebrate the culture. This is my form of education, my form of celebration, and this really important month that I think is overlooked too often. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right, y'all. We're going to learn how to adult together.